Okay, Bez Hashem, today's daf, daf Chav Beis. Very interesting daf. Talks about het nedarim and the causes why people make nedarim. So we're starting from about Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, about 1, 2, 3, 7 lines from the bottom. Hahu. So Hahu, a story. So basically, we have to understand one thing, a very important point. And the point is that when it comes to being mater and neder, the Chazal were not so happy being mater and neder, because there are two ways to be mater and neder. One way to be mater and neder was through a charata. A person regrets making the neder. But the problem with charata, regret, is we don't trust the guy. Does he really regret making the neder, or is he too lazy to keep the neder? That's the problem. The problem with charata is we don't like to be mater and neder with the regret, because we don't know, is the person lazy or does he really, really regret making the neder? So we learned yesterday that there was an opinion, ein poichsin becharata. That's in the middle of the page. You don't undo. Poichsin means open up a neder, because a neder is like a knot. And you don't undo the neder with just a regret. So then we have the other thing, a Pesach. Remember what a Pesach is. You weren't aware of something, and had you been aware of a situation or something, then you would not have made a neder. And we gave an example. We gave an example of somebody made a neder. Somebody made a neder not to have anything to do with his friend, and then all of a sudden he realized is that his friend was in the process of making him a surprise birthday. So that is something he did not know, was not aware of on the time of the neder. So that is called a Pesach. Okay, but it's not something you need to know about your friend. There's some things that if you weren't aware, that's called a Pesach. The problem with a Pesach is, and then we'll start. The problem with a Pesach is we don't trust you when you say sometimes, oh, if I was aware of that, I would have never made a neder. Because perhaps you're just being intimidated to say that. But really, you would have made the neder no matter what. So we don't trust Pesach. We don't trust Charata. So it's not so simple to be mater and neder. So the Gemara is discussing cases where the Rabbanim did be mater neder. So let's read. Okay, again, 7 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph on the base. Hahu da'aseh lekame de Rav Asi. There was a man who came to Rav Asi. Amalei. So Rav Asi wanted to be mater neder. He coming to Rav Asi to be mater neder. Amalei. So Rav Asi said, Kadu tahis, are you in such pain that you made a neder? I mean, are you so disturbed by it? So is it a sincere regret? Amalei. So the man said, Loi, not? Of course I am. So he was trying to say, will you doubt me? Of course I am. So you see, Rav Asi was on the fences whether to be mater this person's neder, but nevertheless, he was mater the neder. Next, another story. Hahu da'aseh lekami de Rab Loza. A man came to Rab Loza. Amalei. So he asked, Bayas nidar. So he asked, did you really want to make this neder? Amalei, he said, Ilu loy magazin lay, if people would not have frustrated me and angered me at the time I made the neder, loy ba'in and klum, I wouldn't have wanted this neder at all. So he explained that the reason why he made this neder is more than just a regret, but he was making it out of anger, out of being provoked. So Amalei, so Rabbi Laza said, Tehei kebayis. So it should be like what you want it now. In other words, if you sincerely regret making the neder, then I permit you, and this neder is not you're released from the neder. Then the Gemara says another story. Remember what a Pesach is. It's a thing that had you known such a thing would happen, you would have not made the neder. That's called a Pesach. Not a regret, but something else. So let's see. There was a woman, a mother. She got so angry at her daughter, she made a neder that her daughter, can't benefit, has to leave the house or something like that. She can't benefit anything that belongs to the mother. So they wanted to release the neder. I'll say lekam Rabbi Yochanan. So they came before Rabbi Yochanan. Amallah. So he told the mother, Ilu hayavidat. If you would have known, the amarnum miger sach, that your neighbors will, gossip, alay de brite, regarding your daughter. And they're going to gossip knowing that you made this neder, and they will say, we go to Chav Beis Amud Aleph, ilu loy chamu'us be imay milin da aziba, if the mother would not have seen something that caused her to want to, have nothing to do with this child, to sort of like kick the child out, bichdi lo yadarte, she would never have made such a neder. In other words, the people are talking and schmoozing and saying, oh, it's only because the mother must know something terrible about this daughter, and that's why she made the neder. So the Rabbi Yochanan asked, had you known that the neighbors are going to gossip about you making this neder, mi adarta, would you have made this neder? Amar law, she said, like, lie, I would have never made this neder, knowing that I'll be the subject of the gossip papers. So therefore, Visharye, Rabbi Yochanan, released her from the neder. So that's called a Pesach. Another situation, Bar Breitad to Rabbi Yanai, the son of the daughter of Rabbi Yanai. So basically his grandson. So here you have it, Alan, here you have it. A grandson of Rabbi Yanai, Saba.
Okay.
See that? I just, and I don't know, I'm my father's Saba. I'm called Oppa. I don't know what you call yourself. But Zaidi, okay. So Bar Breitad to Rabbi Yanai, the grandson of Rabbi Yanai Saba. So the grandfather of Rabbi Yanai had his grandson come to him. Asay l'kamed Rabbi Yanai Saba. He came in front of him. So his grandson came to him and to be mater neder. Malay. So Rabbi Yanai Saba said, the Zayde Rabbi Yanai said, Ila havi yadat. He says a fascinating thing. Now look what he tells his grandson. Ila havi yadat. If you would have known, the following happens when you make a neder. In heaven, the paskin pinkasa, they open up your book, your accounting book, and they start examining your deeds. Minadart, would you have made a neder? In other words, when a person makes a neder, so automatically it's like inviting the IRS. It's inviting an audit. You're inviting an audit upstairs. Now, why is that? Because you think you're so holy that you can make a neder. God gives you things that are prohibited. Now you're trying to add something more than what God made prohibited. So they start examining your book, your accounting. So if you would have known that's what happens when you make a neder, would you have made a neder? Amalei. So his grandson answered, like, not. Visharye, and he released the grandson from the neder. So Amar Rababa said, Micro, what is a pasuk that says that after you make a neder, they start examining you? Ba'achar nedarim levaker. After you make a neder, there starts the investigation. That's what it's pasuk in Mishlei. Says the Gemara. The Gemara concludes, Va'afagav the pasuk Rabbi Yanai, even though Rabbi Yanai used this as a Pesach to release his grandson from a neder, we don't use it. We don't use that as a good Pesach. And here's the reason. Because when you tell somebody that, he's going to be too intimidated. Hello, is the sound on? Did people hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
It was breaking up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you hear me? Okay. So, so we're going to say like this. So his va'afagav the pasuk Rabbi Yanai lay, even though Rabbi Yanai used this as a Pesach, anan loy paschina lei baha. We don't use this as a Pesach because a person is intimidated by people by this statement. So he's for sure going to say, "Oh, I would have never made the neder." And it could be that in the state of mind that he was in when he made the neder, even if you would have told him this, he would have still made the neder. So it's not considered such a good Pesach. The Gemara gives you another example of what is not called a good Pesach. We don't use another Pesach. Another example of a possible information that was missing from the person when he made the neder. If you tell a person, the Amar Rabba Babachana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, my Pasach le Rabbi Gamliel lahu Saba, what did Rabbi Gamliel use as a Pesach to release an old man from a neder? He used to tell a person, Yesh boite kemat karois chorev, u'l'shoin chachamim marpei. that. So he used this pasuk in Mishlei, and he darshaned it. Kol habayteh roi l'doikre b'cherev. If you're very loose with the lips, it's worthy for you to be stabbed by a sword. But there's always a way that Chachamim could heal you. In other words, they could release you from the vow. So basically, if he would have heard that expression from Chazal, that if you make Nedarim, it's like it's better for you, it's appropriate for you to be stabbed with a knife, would you have made such a neder? So that's what Rabbi Gamliel used. But we don't use that, the Gemara says, because person will, in the state of mind that he was in, we don't trust him if he says, I would have never made the neder. Maybe in the state of mind, he would have still made the neder, knowing this axiom from Chazal. And then the Gemara says, let's give you another example, which wouldn't be a good Pesach. If you tell a person, the following brisa, you're missing a piece of information that had you known, you probably wouldn't have made the neder. The Tanya we learned in the brisa, Rav Nosson says, if you make a neder, it's as if you built a bama, an altar for, let's say, for avodah zara. And if you keep your neder, so you follow through, hilu makrav of carbon, as if you put a sacrifice on this altar. In other words, you will makriv a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash. So why is that? Again, the same idea. Really, there's certain boundaries where HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the mitzvahs and the loises, and that's enough. You don't have to start adding prohibitions to try to make yourself more pious. So that's what Rab Nelson's opinion about this whole neder business. So Bereisha Paschinan, for the first half, that's good Pesach, because nobody's intimidated to say, if I would have known that, I would have still made the neder. He'll be more truthful about it if you tell him this statement, and he'll say, maybe I would have still made the neder anyway. But B'Seitva, the second part, that if you tell somebody that even if you keep a neder, it's as if you're sacrificing a sacrifice outside the Beis Hamikdash, which is a big avera, Abaya Ama Paschinan. That's a good Pesach. We can use it. Rava says, Loi Paschinan. We don't make a good Pesach. So that's the end of that statement of Rav Nosson. Rav Kahana Masnil Hoshmaitz about the Shona. That was Rav Kahana's opinion of where Abai and Rava argue. But the Gemara says Rav Tavyuni Masi Hache. Rav Tavyuni had a different version of the machlokes between Abai and Rava. B'Seifa Loit Paschinan. Everybody agrees that you don't use the axiom of Habam Kaimoi Kila Makrav of carbon as a Pesach for a neder. That for sure you don't use it. But the first part of what Rav Nosson said, that Hanoida, if you make the neder, is as if you built an altar for Avodah Zarah, Abaya Ama Paschina, you use it as a Pesach. Rava Ama Loi Paschina, and Rava says you don't use it as a Pesach. The Hilkus of the Halacha is Loi Paschina, Loi Bereishav, Loi B'Seifa. It's not a good Pesach at all. Again, why is it not a good Pesach? Because if you tell somebody, you were missing information when you made the neder. Had you known, Rab Nosson frowned upon people making a neder. In fact, he called people who made a neder as if they built an altar, and those that keep it as if they sacrificed on that altar. Would you have made the neder? So he wants to feel religious, so he's going to be intimidated to say, yes, I would not. He would say, no, I would have never made the neder. But really, in the state of mind that he was in when he made the neder, he would have made the neder. So he's not going to be so truthful. So we don't trust him on such a Pesach. And one final example of we don't use it as a Pesach. In other words, we don't use religious information as an example. What Shmuel said. Shmuel said, even though you keep your neder, Nikra Rasha, for some reason you're called an evil person. In other words, the fact is that something drove you to make nedarim, and you're keeping your neder. You're not doing something that was permitted for you to do. But the fact that you had to go about make the neder, you must have been a rasha, and therefore, again, Shmuel frowns upon people who make nedarim. How do you know somebody who makes a neder is called in rasha? Because basically, and this will lead in. Hold on. this will lead into the Gemara, because very often people who have a temper make nedarim, which leads into the next Gemara. So how do you know somebody who makes nedarim is called a rasha? Amar Ababo, Mikra. The pasuk says, "V'chisechta lindar liyi b'chachet." If you refrain from making a neder, the Torah says you will not come to sin. V'yalav chadala chadala. We learned chadala. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to try to hold on 1 second. The Yalef, okay, I hope you can hear me better now. The Yalef chadala. We learn chadala. Ksiv hacha kisechta lindar ksiv hacham sham risharim chadlu regis. There, in the grave, Eve was saying, Rishonim, stop their provoking you. So it says chadlu and it says sechtal. So we see that somehow making a neder makes you being called a rasha. Amar Rav Yosef said, Afanam Tami Tanina. It's a Mishnah that usually describe this habit of making nedarim. Is the Mishnayos call them rishoyim. Nidrei kasherim loyma klum. Nidrei rishoyim noda benozer v'karban mishul. We have this Mishnah, but basically, if you say I want to make something like a nidrei rasha, then it's an effective neder, because rishoyim make a lot of nedarim and they swear a lot. If you say kinidrei kasherim, that's like it's you're contradicting yourself. You want to make a neder, but you want to make a neder like a kosher person makes a neder. A kosher person does not make a neder. So that's why it's loyam klum. It means you said nothing. So now we're going to begin new Gemara, but it's connected to the Gemara, as we keep saying that the Gemara is discussing who are the types of people that make nedarim. Usually it's somebody who is an angry person, who's provoked and gets angry. So that's what the Gemara is now going to discuss, the detrimental effects of being angry. Now, if we're going to describe this, I don't think that the Gemara is talking about somebody who erupts in rage. I'm not sure. I don't think the Gemara is talking about that. I think the Gemara is talking about is somebody who's suppressing his anger, but he's angry on the inside of him. So inside of himself. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Rab Nachmani, Amar Rab Yonasan. Kol hakoyas, anybody who's constantly angry. So that's referring to somebody who has anger inside of him. So the Gemara says, Kol mine gehenim sholtem boy. All types of hell overtake him. In other words, so the Ran learns pshat, because once you're always constantly angry, you end up disregarding that there is a God on the world, and you'll end up doing very much severe sins. So it leads to other averas. But also it could mean that kol mini gehenim sholtem boy, all meaning is all types of gehenim come to a person, because you get so many. You're bringing upon yourself many types of ailments and sicknesses, like high blood pressure, headaches, and all sorts of things that cause you to suffer. Shne'ama, because the pasuk says v'hasek kas milibecha. That's what my point is. You should remove the anger from your heart. And then by that you will drive away evil from your body. And evil means Gehenim. Shnema, Kol po Hashem l'maneu. Everything Hashem created was for His sake. The Gam Rasha. Even if an evil person is created, God made him for a purpose. Evil people who you encounter is maybe to teach you a lesson, but it's God who created him. But nevertheless, the pasuk says, "L'yoyim ra," he will go to that day of he'll have his day of reckoning, where he'll end up in Gehenna. But the point over here is that if you're constantly raging on the inside, you're just suppressing it. Then it's then you're bringing upon yourself all types of Gehenna. And not only that, the Gemara says, not just high blood pressure. Shachtonius is like. What is that? That's IBD, IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. That's what that takes over. Shnema v'nosham Hashem l'chol Hashem leiv ragos v'chlinin anayim v'dav v'nosham. God will give you there an angry heart that causes you to have failing eyesight and a languishing soul. Eza davar. What type of sickness is shemachalas anayim that causes you to have a failing eyesight? umadir nefesh, and causes you to have a languishing soul, which you have a lot of fatigue. If someone has IDB, bowel disease, he's drained. That is tachtonis, and it comes about through not getting rid of the rage that's in your heart, the anger that's in your heart. So you have to deal with it in a very healthy way. Somebody said that, I remember, somebody said that anger is like a child in a car. You want the child in the car because you want to take him places because he's your child, but you don't want him driving the car. And yet you don't want to stuff him in the trunk. You have to have him in the back seat or something like that. So same thing with anger. You don't want it to overtake your common sense, but you don't want to suppress it either. So you have to deal with it in a healthy way where the anger is teaching you something. The Gemara says, I would say, like a fascinating story. Ula b'miskila Eretz Yisrael. Ula on his way up to Eretz Yisrael, he was coming from Babylon. Islavu le trei b'nei Chazoi badei. He had two men from Chazoi with him. Okay, so Ula with these two men, probably they're on a wagon or something on their way up from Bavel to Israel. Kamchad, a fight erupted, obviously, between the two men. Kamchad shachatei lechavrei. One got up and slaughtered his friend. He stabbed him. Amorlei le'ula. So the man who did the stabbing said to Ula, Yais avadi, didn't I do good? I shut this guy down. Amalei, so Ula in a panic, like he was afraid for his own life. You did very well. And why don't you open up where you actually made the stab wound? So as the Rav explained, so he can die faster. So Ula sort of encouraged him and said, "You did okay, and just open the wound so he dies faster." He asked the Rabbi Yochanan. When Ula came to Rabbi Yochanan, so Amalei, he felt so guilty. Dilma chas v'shalom achziki yedei avera. I supported somebody who did an avera. In other words, I gave him encouragement. I didn't tell him he did something terrible. Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan said, "Nafshecha hitzalta. You saved your own life, because if you would have told him he did something wrong, he would have killed you also." Now that's the point. I come from Kew Gardens. There they had there was a Kitty Genovese where somebody was killed in front of 30 people. Nobody wanted to say anything or call the cops. And during those years in the 60s. So it's a famous place. And same thing idea. Sometimes it's more dangerous to tell the person you did something wrong at that moment. Anyway, Kam Tamei Rabbi Yochanan. But it seems that these were Jewish people. One killed the other. Kam Tamei Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was wondering, how could it be that a Jew kills a Jew out in Israel? Rabbi Yochanan thought this story happened when they arrived in Israel. Such kind of violence does not happen in Israel. Only God gives you such a raging heart over there in Bavel, but not in Israel. Israel, such violence cannot be. So Ula said to him, at that moment when this event took place, we go to Amud Beis, Loi Avrinen Yardana. We were in Israel, but we didn't cross the Jordan River. So it's like quasi-Israel. And therefore, this violence could take place outside of Israel. Rabbi Bar Huna said, Kol HaKoyes. Maybe this part of the Gemara is teaching you that if you erupt in anger, Kol HaKoyes, if you angered and you're erupting in anger and you're dealing with common sense, even the God's presence is not, you wouldn't even consider God's presence. It means nothing to you. Shenema, Russia, in the height of his anger, Bal Yidrosh doesn't, research what's around him. Ein Elikim Kol Mizimoisav. In all his planning, God doesn't take a reckoning that God is there. So even if he might be such a learned person, but if he erupts in anger, then he will not feel or take into account that God's presence is there. Rabbi Yirmiyah from Difti said, "Mishakeach Talmudai." You forget your learning. Umaisiv tipshus, and this is the point. You add foolishness to you. You see, in the Chumash you find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he got angry, he forgot his learning. but to require much more foolishness, you add more foolishness to your words. That happens when you anger, and that we have a pasuk in Koheles, Shnema ki kas b'chei kasilim yanuach. That anger is in the lap of a fool, uksiv, and its pasuk says uksil, a fool yifrais ibalas, would unfold foolishness, folly. So what it's trying to say is that when a person is in anger, he becomes a fool, and he just continues doing foolish things. Now, the Gemara wants to know, the Gemara just switches, the same thing is talking, the subject is anger. But what can drive a person to become an angry person? So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, if you see somebody who's an angry person or is a raging person, you should know about this person. He has more averus, I don't know, from his merits. He has more averus than his merits. Shenema, the pasuk says, Ubal Chema, somebody who's an angry person, Ra Pasha, he has a lot of averus, a lot of negligence. What I think it means is, if a person is not careful in the kedusha of a Jew, he's not careful into his shmir sanayim or things like that, then that leads to having anger inside of you. And that's why I don't think the Gemara doesn't say that his averus are more than his mitzvahs. His merits, his averus are more than his merits. It's implying things that are not so averidic, but it's not the Ratzon Hashem, and that leads to a person bringing upon himself to have more of a temperamental mindset. Now the Gemara just talks about Kas, so the Gemara gives one final statement. Amar of Adam Rab Chanina, Ili Mali Chati Yisrael, if the Jews would have never sinned throughout their history, Lo Nitan Lehem Ela Chamisha Chumshei Torah V'Sefer Yahushua Bavad. The whole Torah would be only the 5 books of Torah, and Sefer Yeshua, which talks about the division of Eretz Yisrael. She'erka shel Eretz Yisrael, that discusses the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. That's all we need. The whole point of Tanakh is to discuss the history of the Jewish people and how we angered and we did Avodah Zarah and Zinus and all that. And Hashem sent Nevi'im and that led to this and that and the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. All that came about because we are not angry, but angering God. My Tama, and what's the pasuk? Ki b'roiv chachma, God made the Torah excessive wisdom because Rav Kas, because there's a lot of times we anger God. So the whole Torah is because we are angering God. I'm not sure if this is related to what we talked before, but it talks about not us becoming angry, but us angering God. And because of that, now we have 24 books of Tanakh, of which generally people are not so proficient in them. Okay, so now back to the Gemara. Again, we got into this discussion because the whole reason why people make Nedarim is because they get angry. Amar Rabbi Asi said, Ein niskakin l'lekei Yisrael. If a man makes a shvuah, he swears. Now this is an oath. And he says, I swear in the name of God, the God of the Jewish people, such and such. Then Bezdin will not be mater such a neder. That's it. They will not be mater neder. It has God's name in it. The reason is because if you matter it, if they release you of the neder of the shvuah, it turns out that you said God's name in vain. Because when they release you from the shvuah, it turns out that you never made a shvuah in the first place. So what did you do? You said God's name in vain. So generally speaking, the Bezdin will not release a person from a shvuah that he swore in the name of God. If a person makes a neder against his wife from benefiting, he's so angry at his wife. Why? Because my wife, maybe it's his second wife, she stole from my bank or from my purse, and she slapped my son, and therefore he's angry at his wife. That even if he swore in the name of God, we would be mater it. Why? Because shalom bayis, and we find in the Chumash that God doesn't mind having his name erased if it brings shalom bayis. So to be mata such a neder of shalom bayis, that we would do. Either he found out she never did it, or the girsa should be he found out that she did do it, and therefore even if she hit him and she hit his son and stole from him, and so this neder works, we would still release this kind of shvua, even if it was made in the name of God. Says the Gemara, man came to Ravasi. How did you make your net? It doesn't mean neder. It means how did you swear? He said, I swore Belakei Yisrael in the name of God. Allah. So Ravasi said, like we said, if you just said I swear and you didn't say God's name, Shekinu ba'alma, that's just a substitute for the word shvua, mizdakin kiknalach. I would have released you from your swearing. You did not use a substitute, but you actually said God's name. I swear in God's name, that we're not going to release you from this shvua. And then the Gemara says one final thing. Rav Kahana ikla lebei Rav Yosef. Rav Kahana was in the house of Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef wanted to pressure Rav Kahana to come eat supper. Amalei litur maramidi. Rav Kahana, you come eat with us, taste something. Amalei, Rav Kahana said, Loi Mari, Loi Mari Kule, Loi Temim Loi. He said Loi, I'm not. He said Loi. That's what you're supposed to put a comma here. Loi, I'm not eating from you. Mari Kule, the God who is the master of everything. Loi Teim Nalei, I'm not tasting from. I'm not going to eat one food. In the name of God, Mari Kule, the master of everything, basically in God's name, I'm not. I swear I'm not going to eat from you. Amalei. So Rabbi Yosef answered, Loi Mari Kule, Loi Teim Nalei. Yes, no. In the name of God, you're not going to eat from me. So sort of Rav Yosef repeated the shvua of Rav Kahana, what he just said. So the Gemara asked that final question. Hani Rav Kahana da Amalei Loi Mari Kule. I understand Rav Kahana. He said, no, I swear in God's name that I'm not eating from you. Rav Kahana had to make the shvua. El Rav Yosef, Amai Amalei Mar Kule, Loi Mari Kule. Why did Rav Yosef repeat the shvua that Rav Kahana just made? Why did he repeat it? So the Gemara answers, this is precisely what Rav Yosef said. He said, did I hear you right? Loi Mari Kule, you said in the name of God that you made a shvur that you cannot eat from me, Hudakamer? Hilkach Loi Ti'imasle, you can never eat from me, because we cannot be mater a shvua, an oath that is made in God's name, except when it comes to shalom bayis. So we learned how we're frowning upon being mater neder, being mater shvua, especially if it's taken in God's name. Do we use a Pesach, or can we use also a charata? So Amar Rav Nachman, Hilkach said the halacha is poischin b'charata. You could actually release a person from a neder if he sincerely regrets it. And b'niskakin, and we also could release a shavua, even if it's meant lelekei Yisrael, even if a guy swore in the God's name. Now, like I told you, that in Shulchan Aruch, probably we don't use charata. We never trust somebody that he sincerely regrets. We combine a Pesach with a charata by we saying, if you would know now this information that you're going to regret making this neder, would you have made this neder? And he says no. Then we matter the neder. Again, being matter neder, according to if you have a chance, just look over this Ram. At the end, the Ram says that there's some people who say in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Goyim that we never should be matter a neder and never matter a shvua unless it's for a mitzvah reason. If you have a certain pressing reason, then we could be mater. But generally, you should not be mater a neder or a shvua. This is how some of the goyim paskin. But we don't in Shulchan Aruch, we don't paskin. We're very easy with nedarim, because if we're not that way, people are just gonna violate their neder, and it's better the other way, just not to impose upon the stringencies of the neder and try to release people from the nedarim that they made in haste. Okay.
What do you expect from him? You expect they should say he's